until the priest came round again to offer a sip of cheap wine from the chalice, which she pretended to take. Then she stood up, crossed herself, and unobtrusively walked out of the church without waiting for the completion of the Mass. St. Martin's was at the corner of the cathedral close, and she looked around in the early morning air to make sure that no one was watching her, before putting a hand to her mouth. Spitting out the consecrated host, which she had kept stored inside her cheek, she carefully wrapped it in a scrap of cloth taken from a small pouch on her girdle, before replacing it and stepping out quite briskly up Martin's Lane past the coroner's house. It was the first step towards an appointment with a noose that would be thrown about her wrinkled neck. Chapter 1, in which Crowner John finds a strange doll. Robert de Pridius was feeling out of sorts on this hot Tuesday afternoon. He rode his big bay gelding slowly along the high road towards Exeter, wondering uneasily what he might have eaten to give him this burning under his breastbone, and the frequent belches that erupted from his belly. He had left Buckfast Abbey that morning, but the good breakfast that the monks had given him in the guest hall was surely as wholesome as one could wish. He had settled a mutually satisfying deal for 200 bales of new wool from the abbey's famous flocks, and the abbot's satisfaction had been reflected in the hospitality he had been given. No, it must have been that damned inn where he had eaten some dinner an hour ago. He had thought then that the pork was overspiced, probably to conceal the fact that the meat was going off in this hot weather. Robert belched again, and tried to ignore the fact that he had had these pains on and off for some weeks. He was 48 years old, comfortably rich, and considerably overweight. Red of face and short of neck, the fuller had inherited his woolen mill on X Island from his father. He had built it up into a good business during the long years of peace that was turning Exeter into one of the most prosperous towns in England. As well as turning the raw wool into yarn, he now had a dozen looms working for him around the city, making the cloth that sold so well at home and abroad. As he jogged along the dusty road, he tried to ignore the ache across his chest, which felt as if an iron band was being tightened around his ribs. Instead, he diverted his thoughts to his beloved wife Cecilia, who, as with so many successful men, was a powerful spur to his ambitions. A strong character, there was no doubt of that, and she was handsome even in her middle age. She had borne him 3 strong daughters, but unfortunately not a single son. He supposed that one day he would have to pass on his business to the eldest son-in-law, who was decent enough, though rather stupid. But he would have preferred to see a de Pridius as millmaster. The alternative, which he vowed would happen only over his dead body, would be to sell out to Henry de Hockford, his main rival in the fulling trade, and as obnoxious a man as ever trod the soil of Devon. The thought of Henry seemed to increase the ache in his chest. Now he fancied it was even spreading up into his throat. Though the city was now only a couple of miles away, he felt the need for a rest and something to drink, even if it was only the poorest ale. The afternoon was hot, but surely not enough to cause this sweat that was beading on his forehead and sticking his undershirt to his skin. He was passing through Alphington, a hamlet on the west side of the river within sight of the cathedral towers. It was little more than a score of thatched wattle and daub cottages, a wooden church and a larger hut, with 2 old barrels and a brewing pole outside to mark it as an alehouse. He pulled the horse to a halt in front.